Welcome, everybody, to another presentation of the online ColdFusion Meetup. I'm Charlie Arehart, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. And in this edition of the Meetup, our 315th, being recorded on Thursday, August 20th, 2026 at noon, U.S. Eastern Time, we've got me. Glad to be back. Let me say real quick that I'm going to have other presenters who gave talks at the summit back in Vegas a couple months ago come on. And I've got another one I'm going to do. I did two that they asked me to step in because somebody had to drop out. So I'll do another one of mine. So I'll get those announced shortly. But let's go ahead and get started with this one, which, as you've seen and can see on the screen, is my talk called Hidden Gems in CF2025 a year later. And I'll explain what that really means. It's maybe not quite as obvious. But I also want to remind folks that if you're interested in spreading the word about the meetup, there's the URL for it, ColdFusionMeetup.com. Redirects to that meetup.com section for our meetup specifically. And then the recordings of the presentations are available on that link, which is also the YouTube recordings page link. So all of our sessions back to 2015 are recorded on YouTube, and back to 2006 are recorded on Connect. Some of them are gone, but anyway, no, we can't solve all the problems in the world. All right, so let's move on to my talk. So welcome, everybody. For those who don't know, again, my name is Charlie Arehart. I'm an independent consultant, troubleshooter. You can reach me to follow up with any questions or comments about the talk. There's my email address, and there's my handle on all the major social media. Very easy to remember, Arehart. And there's a QR code. You can go ahead and grab that recording right now. Feel free to, grab that QR code to download the PDF of this presentation. And I did another variant of it at CF Summit back in May. This is an update of that one. So you'll see it says last updated. So make sure you see the one that says last updated of this week. All right, let's get started. So for those who maybe hadn't been paying close attention, CF 2025 was released back in February of last year. So it's been, 18, 19, 20 months. So this talk is about that talk, sure, granted, and it's been out for over a year. And as with most CF releases, there's lots of new features, and there's changes, and there's challenges. And there have been updates to it since then, several updates. You may have heard about the one in May called Update 8. It should have been ColdFusion 2026, but they didn't call it that. They called it Update 8 of CF 2025. And it was, mostly classified as an AI update, an update allowing CF to do AI integration. But it does much more, and we'll talk a bit about that in this presentation. But that's not what this talk is about. This is not about Update 8. That's just one of many things I'll talk about, because there's hidden gems in the Update 8, and then there's a whole bunch of hidden gems in the original CF 2025 when it came out. I also want to clarify, I did a CF Hidden Gems in CF 2025 talk in last year, in the middle of the year. This talk, since I had to accommodate new stuff that's new in many of the updates, not just Update 8, and also just for other reasons, this talk is a revision of that. It's a subset, and in some ways, I'll leave some details. I'll point you to that talk to get that detail, and then I add some new stuff in this talk. So I also want to point out that I have a related talk, and it's different than this one. That talk is called Migrating Apps to CF 2025 from earlier CF versions. And I've done that for each of the releases. That's about what are the challenges you'll encounter, right? This one's the hidden gems, and then that one's about the challenges. I could call this one why you should want to update to CF 2025, and then that one could be why you want to be careful trying to update. And it's not new. That was true for 23 and 21. And in fact, in that talk, I cover whether you're moving from 23 to 25 or from 21 to 25, in which case I also mentioned what was new and challenging, not new, what was not, I don't talk about what's new and different in this talk. I'll talk about what was challenging, what are compatibility issues, what are features removed, that sort of stuff. And I'll talk just a little bit about that too in this talk, just a little bit, but the majority of that sort of stuff is in that other talk. So again, think of this as what are the cool things about the new update that you'll want to know about, and that one is more about when you're ready to do it. What are some of the challenges you might encounter? Even in this talk, I can't cover all that was new. I had 40 minutes at the summit. We have about 60 minutes at these CF meetups. So this isn't even all that's new, nor even all that was new in the updates. I just can't do that. that would be a day of stuff if I wanted to. So I just highlight some key things that you might easily miss, what I call hidden gems. So again, if you missed it, here's the QR code to grab the slides, or just go to my website, and I'll hop over there right now. I just want to show you if you haven't been there. If you go to careheart.org, that's my site. And yes, old school looking anyway, up at the top is a link for presentations, or right there, there's a link to presentations. And either way, takes you to the page, which lists all the presentations by year and keeps track of them. And so if you just click on this one for hidden gems, right, there's the one for migrating apps. Here's this one. And you'll see I've got a PDF for this talk and the PDF from the summit and the title and description. Okay. I need to update this to say I was given it here. Anyway, moving on. Deal with that later. All right. And quickly, for those who don't know me, sometimes people don't know me. They just see me in the community or see me giving talks, and they don't really know what I do for a living. So I got 30 years of CF experience. I've presented to most of the CF conferences that have ever happened. And I've been focused for the last 20 years on CF server troubleshooting. And I say CF means Lucy and Boxlang even as well. As an independent consultant, I don't work for anybody, work for myself. And I could work for you in as little time as you want, little as 15 minutes. If you've got problems, you or your team have any CF related problems, I help solve them by a remote screen share, usually in less than an hour, even challenging problems, and explain them as we go. Now, some can take longer, but most are done in less than an hour. And here's the best part. If you don't find that what I help you with is valuable, then you won't pay for that time. It's that simple. I don't expect you to pay for time you don't find valuable. So you can find more about my rates and approach and the online calendar to grab a slot of time and so on at careheart.org/consulting. There's a link on that other page, but there you go. That's a quick way to get to it. And again, we're not selling anything in this talk except why you want to consider going to ColdFusion 2025. All right, so let's go on. As far as finding out more about CF 2025, I want to point out that the docs from the original release are really substantial, and they nearly all have demo code. So I'll talk about some things, and sometimes I'll show a little demo. Sometimes I won't, because they've already done it. Again, I don't have time to go over everything in detail, even the hidden gems. I can't go into all the hidden gems in detail. So I want to make this clear. The docs for CF 2025 are substantial, and nearly all of the references to things related to code have demo code. And then this update 8 that came out in May of this year, which, the AI update, but a lot more, it has its own very substantial docs, and they have demo code. So again, don't feel like this talk is where you need to see a demo of everything. This talk is making you aware of things. And you might say, well, I could read the docs for that. Well, you could. Most people don't. Anyway, if you did, you might still miss things, right? So that's why I call them hidden gems, because sometimes they're not obvious. Some of them are going to be there, obviously, but some of them are not. Or I might tell you a nuance that's not covered so obviously. Anyway, the key resources that you want to be aware of, and these each have their own links to other pages with more detail, is first this doc on what's new in CF 2025. See on the far right, what's new, CF2025.html. Big long URLs, I can't help that. That's nobody's choice. But anyway, that's the page, and I want to show you that real quick because you've maybe never seen it before. Here's what's new. Now notice, watch carefully, it's what's new in 2025. There's another one that was what's new in update 8. Looks very similar, but it's only on what's new in 8. This was the one that came out. And look, I know it says last update, May 26th. They always say this. Don't pay too much attention to that last update date. I don't know why, but it often changes when the page hasn't necessarily changed. Sometimes it is because it changed, but sometimes it's not. So don't focus on that. This is the what was new in 2025. And then I'm just going to page down and show you that there's a lot listed here and things with links and links and links and links and links. So I'm not going over them in detail. I'm just going to show you that, for example, the stuff about CSV, there's links to the functions. Stuff about new functions here, there's links to the functions. New, it's not just function. There's other language changes. So just come back and look at this page. I'm telling you, it's a key page that you want to pay attention to. Excuse me. And then there was an update, a what's new page about update 8. And it's weird. If you look at the URL, it just says what's new. Introduction to ColdFusion, what's new. Again, I don't understand sometimes the choices that are made. The what's new CF 2025 was what was new in 2025. This one that literally just says what's new, it's what's new in update 8. Go figure. Anyway, go check that out on your own. And then also I'll talk about sometimes that each update that comes out might itself introduce a new feature or a change or something you should be aware of. And there's a page, some people don't know this, there's a page that lists all of the updates. And there's one for 25, and there's one for 23, and there's one for 21, and so on. So go look at that page to learn about the updates. And each of those has a tech note for that update, which talks about what changed in that update. And I'll give a little bit of insight into that later. I want to say here too that you might have missed this. In May of this year, Adobe changed to using from using helpx.adobe.com to guides.adobe.com. So this was an Adobe-wide change in their documentation, architecture, the platform, and the URLs. And sometimes there's a HelpX URL will redirect to a guides one. Let me tell you, I've seen some HelpX URLs that are still out there and sometimes are not updated because there's a guides version and a HelpX version. So again, I can't solve these problems. I'm just letting you know, pay attention. You want to go to the things that say guides generally. And if it says HelpX, you want to wonder, ooh, could this be an old version? And maybe just see if you change it from HelpX to guides. Is it going to work? Now, it's not always going to work because sometimes they change the URLs in other ways, but they do have redirects. I don't want to dwell on this. I'm just saying, beware. It should say guides. And by and large, the docs site is better. It's got better search. When you search for stuff, it uses AI integration and comes back like the search engines do these days with an AI summary, and then also links to the things that it found. And anyway, I think it could be better, but it's definitely gotten better. So that's a good thing. So let's move on. All right. So about the hidden gems. Sorry, I know we're 10 minutes in and we're just getting to the gems, but that was, fundamental stuff that I think helped to lay the groundwork. So I'm going to focus first on what was new in the original 2025 release and then talk about later things came out as update 8. So the major changes, and I'm not going to focus on this, but I want you to be aware what you'll hear most often about what was new in 2025 as promoted by Adobe regarding code was new processing of CSV files, which is pretty cool. If you have need to do CSV file processing, you saw when I showed you that page, there was a lot of things mentioned about that. That's one of the major new things is the ability to better process CSVs, reading them, writing them, and doing analysis of them. And similarly of spreadsheets, there's more fine-grained formatting control and the ability to stream spreadsheets and more. And then also capabilities about charts with new chart sets and themes and groups and clusters and blah, blah, blah. So if those things interest you, go check them out. I want you to know. I also want to say that beyond the docs, that page I just showed you would talk about them, but beyond the docs, check this out. Around the same time in 2025, Adobe came out with a GitHub repo with demonstration code for those new things. So check that out. Many people don't ever notice that there is such a thing. There it is. And then they did videos, and I think these were generally in late 2024. Remember, it came out in February 2025. So in late 2024, they were doing previews and pre-releases of this, and they were doing videos showing what was coming. And there was a whole video on spreadsheet and CSV processing, and there's the link to that. And notice it's whenever I show YouTube links, if I can, I show you not only the link to the thing, but I also show the playlist link. That's how you can have that thing appear in a playlist. So there's other CF2025 videos that they've put into a playlist, and this will show you this one and that playlist. Then there was a whole video on the improvements to CF charts, and there's the link for that. And then I also want to say that you'll hear talk of another major feature, and you might go, I don't need it, but some people need it, a change regarding Microsoft authentication. So specifically support for Entra and Exchange Online and Graph API, which has nothing to do with GraphQL. Anyway, they added a new CF OAuth capability of type equals Microsoft and grant type. If those mean things to you, if you're in that world, you know what that's about. Get off access token, get MS Graph Service Client. CF Exchange connection is a tag in a statement that allows this access token capability as well. And these things are especially important because coming up now, about a month and a half from now, is Microsoft is removing what was called EWS support, and that's used by CF Exchange connection. And it might have impact on other things that you're doing. So these were anticipating that coming Microsoft change. And they're just, more modern OAuth capabilities. So I'll leave you to explore the docs, and then beyond the docs, here's a blog post that they did on the subject of lifecycle management within apps like this that do OAuth. and then transitioning Exchange to the new Graph API capability. Again, Graph API, not GraphQL. And then they did a whole video unlocking data with OAuth. And there's the link to that. All right, so now finally, I see some questions. One thing you miss, this has been one thing I miss about the CF docs. Let me click on it, everybody can see it. Because some people watching the recording in the future wouldn't see these chats that pop up in the StreamYard. One thing I miss about the CF docs is that they used to have a history section. Now I see that's hit and miss. It was always nice to see whether a function or argument was added to the language. Yeah, I agree, 100%. It was even nicer. You might remember we used to have, it was kind of a wiki thing, and we could propose changes, or they would indicate if it was changed. So that was really nice. And there's been talk that, part of this move to the new platform is to add more capabilities. So who knows, maybe we'll see some things improve. Again, I want to say it's vastly improved. So please don't hear me, say these things as casting aspersions. I'm saying it's definitely gotten better. It could still be better, but it's definitely gotten better. So if you haven't been to the CF docs in a while, check it out. You'll see the nav bar is always on the left, the breadcrumbs always across the top, that sort of stuff. It wasn't always true. You'd sometimes search for something in whatever, Google or an AI, whatever, and it would give you a link, and you go to the page and it would just be the text with no context, no left nav bar, no top breadcrumb. At least that's been fixed. It's a vast improvement. Again, like I said, that's a vast improvement. So anyway, let's move on. Okay, so on to the hidden gems. And as I say, sometimes it's the little things. There's so many little things. Like, for example, support of trailing commas. A lot of modern languages have supported this, and some people are like, what's this? I don't need it. Well, hold on, you might need it. So you're allowed to use commas in comma-separated list of values, for example, where you don't know if you're going to add values later. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. Now you might go, I don't get it. All right, so here's an example. Look on the screen. Array equals, and then an array, modern since CF9, CF8, you've been able to say bracket and then the name of the values that were going into the array. Could be numbers, could be strings, could be complex objects. Doesn't matter. The point is, notice it's something, comma, nothing else. Well, prior to CF2025, that would fail. And you might have done that thinking you were going to add something later, or you might do it because you are commenting out on the next line what is another thing. And I could have put this comment on the next line to demonstrate that. But the point is, you can see you're allowed to leave trailing commas. Okay, so that's cool. Little things might help somebody. Obviously, it's not going to make your code dramatically better, but it might help make something better. And it's not just in arrays, but also when you're defining structs, when you're defining arguments to functions, the calls themselves to functions, array objects, the destructuring capability of arrays and objects. So that's cool. So again, I'll leave you to explore that if that interests you. And there was a whole blog post on it. Check it out. There's a whole blog post on it. And then it was covered also in another post called Language Enhancements in CF2025. And they said release 2. They didn't mean there was a release 2. That just meant that was the second of the things covering ColdFusion 2025 release enhancements. Anyway, so moving on. Check this out again, little thing, support for multiple exception types in a single catch. So what do I mean by that? Well, you might do a try to do something that might throw an exception, and then you do a catch with some exception. And we used to have to name catch and some exception, whatever, and then catch some exception, whatever. You don't have to do that anymore. You can just say catch this exception or that exception. And I'll leave you to explore the other possibilities with that. The point is, it might benefit somebody. Don't matter. Doesn't matter if it doesn't benefit you. Just let it go. If you want to learn more about it, there's, again, a whole blog post on it, and also in that other one. And Ben, you might have written about some. I didn't always. Sometimes I found some stuff of yours and I've added that, but I could have missed something. So apologies. Sometimes these things aren't easy to find by searching for them. Anyway, let's move on. Null coalescing operator, and that question mark isn't to say what. That is the operator, a question mark. And this does get confusing because there's the safe navigation operator, which is question mark dot. And then there's the Elvis operator, which is question mark colon. This new one is question mark. Okay. So, and if you go, why is Adobe doing this crap? It's just, where'd they come up with this idea? No. It wasn't Adobe's idea. This is other languages have been doing this for years, maybe decades. And CF has been evolving. And so they added the safe nav several releases ago, and the Elvis a few releases ago. And I know there's debates about how they work and all that. That's not the point of this discussion. The point is there is now this new one. Now, let me just help you if you're like, what are these about? So the safe operator, the question mark dot, that would return an empty value if a key in a struct didn't exist. So if you said foo.bar.baz and baz didn't exist, it would fail, right? But if you say foo question mark dot bar question mark dot baz, then that would return an empty value if baz didn't exist. And again, I know you're going to like, it's just too confusing. I can't keep track. Sure, you can do all your if tests and is defines or struct key exists. Go to knock yourself out. But modern development tries to simplify these things, simplify it in the sense of making it be a little more, terse. And not everybody likes that, but some people love that. The point is CF provided for it. So that's not new. That's been there. And then the Elvis operator. Well, it was different in that it said provide a default or fallback value. So look, it was foo question mark dot bar question mark dot baz question mark colon some fallback value means if baz doesn't exist, don't return an empty string, return this fallback value. And it doesn't have to be quoted string, it could be anything. The point is, this is just a simple demonstration. Okay. So again, these are not new. These are not new. What's new can be confusing to some people. It says it returns the right hand operand when the left hand is null or undefined, right? So it's a slight variation of the two above. Otherwise, it returns the left hand operand. So again, each variant has its place. They're just now possible like they have been in other languages. And these are similar to some other changes about Elvis and ternary operators that are now fail-safe. If you know what that means, great. The Elvis is truthy. If you know what that means, Ben's written about it. Anyway, so you can find out more about those things, lots of places. I want to say also another change related to this is that the bytecode underlying Elvis operators has been improved. And that was good because some people were suffering problems because of the underlying Java bytecode created when you used an Elvis operator. So again, I'm not going to say anything more than that. Just these are things that are new. And if you want to learn more about them, they're covered. These things are all covered, not the old stuff, but the new stuff in that page that I talked about there. So go check it out. And let's move it on. ColdFusion 2025 in February of 2025 added support. So far, everything we're talking about is what was new with 2025, not any update. Added support for CSP or XSS protection. So what's CSP? CSP is Content Security Policy. It's a generally accepted browser security mechanism supported by most of the modern browsers for some time. CF now supports this improved security mechanism, and you can opt to use it or not use it. And it would allow you to restrict how resources are loaded, in particular, inline JavaScript, inline CSS, and even files that you point to. These things can be controlled through powerful new security mechanisms. And it does, if you enable it, it does disable inline JavaScript and inline CSS by default. So to use it, to enable that protection, you have to cause a header, a CSP header, to be generated, and then you'll want to use what's called a nonce, a number used once, and CF has capabilities now to do that creation of the header automatically for you, and then a function that give you the nonce to use in your code. Okay, so that's what's enabled, and it can be done at the admin level in the server settings page. There's a checkbox about this stuff. If you want to do it server-wide, admin-wide, CF-wide, or you can do it in your application as this .enable CSP nonce for script at the application level in either application CFC or CF application. You wouldn't use this dot, you would just say CF application, enable CSP nonce for script. And then at the request level is where you could use the get CSP nonce to say, okay, well, CF, if you generated that thing to do that protection, give me the code that I need to write onto the screen that says this should be allowed. And I know it sounds a little confusing right now. I'm going to leave it alone and say read the docs about it, and I'll give you resources. But I do want to say one thing. If you do turn this on, beware of a problem. And Ben has written about this, and we'll talk about it. I've got a solution. I think, yeah, you hinted at it. Actually, I saw a different problem. Hold that thought. Anyway, the point is, if you enable this CSP capability, either at the app or the admin level, you will find that dumps, CF dump, write dump, will suddenly not look right. They won't look right. They won't function completely, if you know what I'm talking about. So there's a workaround that you could consider on the page that does the dump or in your application CFM, whether you use tags or script, you could set a header yourself. The header would be for the content security policy. You'd effectively be overriding the one that Adobe did. And you'd be putting these extra characteristics that say, I want to allow that inline JavaScript and inline CSS that ColdFusion under the covers builds to do a CF dump. Okay, so if you want to use CF dump and you turn on this feature, you will need to improve. You'll have to modify the header to allow for things that it would have otherwise blocked. And this is something that Adobe can and should fix. And there's a better way they can fix it than doing this. They should be putting those JavaScript and the CSS that are for the CF dump in a file. And if they did that, then this wouldn't happen. But when you have inline JavaScript, inline CSS, I'd mentioned previously that that's something that's blocked by this capability. That's not a ColdFusion thing. That's the purpose of the CSP capability. And I'm just saying, if you want to do a CF dump, then you can add this header either in script or in tag. And this variant may look similar to others you've seen. One fixes the problem that the dump doesn't look right. The other, another element of this on either one of these lines, within there's a bunch of different things. One of them says, allow the JavaScript to run. You've maybe never noticed this, but if you do a CF dump of a complex thing like an array or struct or function or query or CFC, you can click on the dump and it would expand and collapse. It would by default expand stuff and you can click it to collapse it. And that's pretty cool. For those who don't know that, that's a hidden gem from like CF7. But my point is that collapsing stops working if you enable this CSP capability. So this header, if you put it on the page that does your dump or in your application, then it would allow it. Now, it will also allow inline script of other sorts. So you got to think twice about putting it at the application level. But the point is, if you want your dump to work, you got to do it one place or the other. So I know I'm going over this a little quickly. We got a lot to cover. I just want to say, if you want to learn more about it, see my bug report. I filed it yesterday because I was digging into this. I realized before I did this talk, I'd been wanting to look into it since a couple months ago, and I'd forgotten. But yesterday I looked into it, and I discovered the solution and offered a solution, this solution, and a suggestion of what Adobe can do. That's in that bug report at tracker.adobe.com. And I see Ben added a comment. Let's see. One of the first aha moments I had with AI was getting it to explain all the CSV directives for me. It's like reading Greek. There you go. And to that point, let me just say, I'm pretty sure that's what's coming up in my next. Yeah, for more on this new feature, the first place to go is a website called content-security-policy.com. It's not Adobe's thing. Because again, this is not an Adobe thing. It's not a CF thing. It's going to happen in other platforms. Anyway, the point is you can learn more about CSP generally at this website. And of course, you know, if you go to Wikipedia, there'll be stuff. And if you go to the OWASP, I'm sure they have stuff. I didn't want to fill the screen with lots of links, but you can definitely find out more generically about it and then more specifically about it, because there's that what's new page and how specifically they discuss this in that what's new page about what was new in CF2025. And then the lockdown guide, I want to point this out. Pete's lockdown guide, Adobe contracts Pete Freitag to do the lockdown guide. Pete covers this feature in his revision of the lockdown guide for CF2025, just briefly pointing out that you can enable it at the admin level, I think is what his focus is. But the point is, it is covered as a security thing. And there you go. Ben had done his hackathon entry earlier this year or late last year or whatever. And in his blog post, he talked about hitting some road bumps, and some of them I think had to do with part of what I'm talking about. I'm trying to remember exactly what he covered. The point is, I wanted to point that out because you don't see too many people talking. Let me just tell you, Ben, thank you, Ben. His point. We don't see a lot of people talking about this stuff, I think, because it's kind of confusing to people. And they just go, I don't have time to figure it out and write a blog post about it. I looked and looked and looked. There's very little talking about this. So that's another reason why I wanted to add this, because I saw some people complaining that their dumps failed, but they didn't have a solution. So I got the solution, confirmed that it worked, and added the blog post. The tracker. And I'll probably do a blog post about it. And Ben might too. We could talk about if one of us wants to pick one. Anyway, you feel free, man. Go to town. Everybody loves your stuff. All right, moving on. Another new feature of CF2025, another hidden gem, is you can now name the jar path on which to load a Java class on a CF object, on a create object. What do I mean by that? Well, it's got a new parameter of the function or an argument, an attribute of the tag called load paths. And it allows you to name where is a Java library or class file that you want to be loaded on that page for that specific CF object, create object call to do some Java thing. Some of you may know that CF10 had added the ability to do this at the application level, this .java settings.load paths, and that was in CF10 in 2012. And in the last ColdFusion Web Application Construction Kit book that we did, which was just about what was new in CF10, I did the chapter on the Java integration. So this is there, it works, it's worked, and Lucy eventually supported it as well. And then Lucy came along and added the ability to do it similar to this, where you just don't do it in the application level, you just do it on the create object or the CF object. So yes, Lucy's been doing this for years. CF does it also. And I just want to point out, it's a cat and mouse game. Hey, CF2025 supported Java 21 and Tomcat 10 before Lucy did. It's just back and forth, back and forth. We just benefit that in the long run, often certain things bubble up to the top of being in both. Now, of course, each of them does things in a way that sometimes the other doesn't do, and that's too bad, and that's just life in the big city. But I'm just trying to say this is something that, yay, we've got this ability now in CF. And for more about it, they covered it in that language enhancements blog post. Okay. Bunch of other language changes. We're not done. There's still more. So class-sensitive deserialization. Some people really need this. When you do a deserialized JSON, you might want it to preserve the case sensitivity instead of making it all up or all lower. Preserve whatever it is. So you can do that. There's also a new argument for deserializing to a query. So you don't have to do some, complicated code to deserialize the JSON and then do a new query and stick the stuff in there. No, you just deserialize it right to a query. Boom, done. And then that destructuring I talked about that was added in CF 2021, they've been added some enhancements to destructuring. And again, you might go, what the heck is destructuring? Well, again, it's a generic concept from other languages, and it's a powerful way to condense what would often be many lines of code into like one line of code to create some resulting extraction from an array or from a struct or whatever. So I'll leave you to explore it on your own. The point is it's been enhanced in 2025. And there's enhancements to the dumping of Java objects. If you do a lot of dumping of Java objects, check that out. Then you can also, when you're doing a CF property, it used to be that it just had to be a static thing. Now it can be a CF expression, so yay. You can now do compound assignment operands with math and assignment of the result, plus equals, minus equals. And you might think this is like others you've seen, plus plus and minus minus, they've been around forever. These are new ones. So again, if you're interested, explore those. Other languages have had these for a long time. CF's just catching up. So for example, if we have x equals 2 and x plus equals 3, the result is now x equals 5. So yay. Moving on. The duplicate feature function now offers a deep copy. If it's false, it doesn't do the traditional deep copy. Okay. So if deep copy is false, it doesn't do the traditional deep copy. So by default, it does the deep copy. You can say, no, I don't want you to. Okay, moving on. If you know what that means, great. If you use CF query, CF execute, CF query execute, and CF stored proc caching, you now have a cache max idle time. That might benefit some people. Query of queries now supports bitwise operators and the modulo or modulus operator. That could be useful for some people. The script protect feature at the application level can now allow you to configure what tags to block. So some people saw the script protect. It was added in like CF10 again in 2012, but it had a hard-coded things that it protected against. Now this lets you control it. So again, if you're interested, read the docs about it. Directory list now has a callback feature to enhance how it returns the data and processes it. That could be cool. Get time zone has some new capabilities. Otherwise, it uses the local time zone. And now we can do final static methods. And over the years, CF has added more and more enhanced OO type development to CFML since like CF7 when the six when CFCs were added. It's just getting better and better all the time. Again, to some people's tastes. Maybe you're like, I'll never use it. Okay, well, not everything's for you. So Q of Q is now like T-SQL. So let me just pull this up. Paolo asked, Q of Q now is like T-SQL. Well, not not enough to have me to have made that statement. There's plenty that it doesn't do, but you could say it's getting more capable. Let's leave it at that. It's getting more capable. And by the way, T-SQL, there's different flavors of SQL in different database engines, and some use prefixes. And so he might even mean specifically T-SQL specifically, but just even generically, I'll say it's already SQL-like. It could be more SQL-like. There's much more to SQL than Query of Queries allows. And each database engine has its own variants. And that's always going to be a challenge, is that Adobe will probably never add database specific variants, because of course, Query of Queries is a query against a query in memory, and you're doing some generic SQL. And so they're not going to say, well, we'll support a MySQL feature, because if somebody's using SQL Server, they would go, why are you doing that? I will throw a little thing out that I foresee in the future something coming that might dramatically improve this. I want to write about it before I speak of it, but I'll just say that I can see a way that this could be made much more powerful than it is today. But this isn't the time or place to discuss that. So moving on, more hidden gems. The hash function now offers an output encoding argument that might benefit somebody. List sort now offers the ability to control whether it includes empty fields in its callbacks. Java cast supports multiple dimension arrays, and on and on and on. I'm not going to go over every one of these. I don't need to read the words. You can read the words. The point is, there's a lot new in CF2025, and sometimes it's the little things that might rock your world, float your boat, and there's discussions of those specific things. And some slightly different URLs than I've already before. So there were a lot of different resources covering different things, and I'm pointing you to these different things. And they even did a whole video called Smart Language Additions in ColdFusion. And they didn't say 2025 at the time, because this was back in late 2024 when the version hadn't come out, and they don't name the version before it comes out. So they didn't say ColdFusion 2025, and that's what that was about. And there's the URL for that. Okay, moving on. Performance enhancements. A bunch of performance enhancements might benefit some of you. Maybe you don't care. Somewhere at the engine level, and they will benefit how your code runs. So faster spreadsheet processing and streaming, faster compile times, faster query of queries. We've talked about Q of Q, so there you go. It's getting better. Charting, CF and container startup, structure, capability processing. These are all things that are improved in their performance. And there was a whole video called Performance Enhancements, again, late 2024. And so check it out to see what was going to be coming in 2025. And that's what it discusses things like this in more detail. So let's move on. Different kind of gems related to installing and configuring CF. So first, I want to point out that if you've run the full installer of CF, it used to be that it got to a point where it asked, should the IP address of who can access the administrator be limited? And it only showed you the ability to type into that field if you chose a production profile. And I wrote and said, guys, why does that matter? If I'm running development, I might want to limit who can access the admin. So you could always change it in the admin once you installed CF. The point was, during the installer, it wasn't giving us the freedom. So little things, again, little things. Also, starting, I don't know, like CF 2018, the installer just ended without telling you, hey, we don't do the web server configuration anymore. They just took it out. And people were left back then, and sometimes in years since, and when they installed CF newer version, they'd go, hey, where's the part at the end where it integrates with the web server configuration tool? Well, at least now they end by like saying, hey, we don't do that anymore. You have to run the WS config tool. Again, little thing, not a big thing. That's a little thing. This might be a big thing to some of you. You can now set up the built-in web server, the CF administrator, interface web server, port 8500 by default, to use HTTPS. Now, you've been able to do that if you knew how to do it. It was just a matter of configuring certain XML. Well, there is now in the CF admin a new settings page called SSL certificate. And when you go there, you can generate a self-signed certificate, or you can put in a certificate. And yes, you can now make the admin URL, the built-in web server, port 8500, whatever it is for you, served via HTTPS. And usually it's not going to be 8500 anymore. It's going to maybe be 8443 or whatever. But anyway, I'll leave you to explore that more on your own. Also, another little thing in the CF admin on the Java and JVM page, for years I've been leading people through trying to solve problems with it. And I'd say, where's your JVM config? When you change the admin JVM arguments, it's going to be modified in the JVM config. And it had the name, but it didn't say where it was. And people were often like, oh, where am I supposed to find this JVM config? So again, I asked them and they responded, and that was nice. And other people have asked for these other things. I'm just sharing that a few of these things are things I specifically asked for. You file a tracker ticket and sometimes it'll be added, sometimes it won't. My point is that's a nice little thing that will benefit some people. The CF setup tool, it's a command line tool for managing admin config settings from the command line and via JSON files. That has some new capabilities. Some of you might go, isn't that CF config? No, CF config is from Ordisk in command box. It's a command box related capability, but it can be used with anything. You can use CF config. It existed before CF setup. This was added, I think, in CF 2023 or 2021. CF setup is a command line tool for managing the admin settings from the command line in a JSON file. So yay, if you want to check that out, it's got some new capabilities. I did a whole talk on that, by the way. If you go to my presentations page, I have a whole presentation on using the CF setup tool, and I discussed CF config as well and contrast and compare them. And then CCS is the central configuration server that was added in CF 2021 or 23. Point is, it can now support using HTTPS, and you can add nodes manually at the command line for those who are interested in that stuff. And then various admin features were removed because certain features are removed in 2025, and we'll talk about those shortly. Among them are things like this. These are things that just are no longer there in the CF admin of 2025. Okay. There's also, related to JVM settings, there's a JVM docs page, a JVM arguments docs page that Adobe has created, which is really nice. Sometimes there have been various JVM args, system properties, that you could use to control how CF runs when it starts. And that's nice. And some of them are new with each update. They might add or remove a capability that's a protection, and you might need to back off a breaking change to not, to trade compatibility for security. So, and then each version sometimes added new arguments. And so there is now a page that lists these. Check it out. Look at that URL. Just look at the end. It's JVM arguments, ColdFusion 2025. So this is a page that literally starts looking at the update 12 and the new JVM arg that came with that, and 11 and 10 and 9 and 8. And every time an update added new JVM arguments, they're discussed in this page. And then at the bottom, it says, and then here's all the ones that were new as of CF 2025. And then below that, it shows some others that have been around for a while. So that's a real hidden gem, because some people don't realize that that's there. And sometimes, here's the key point, check this out. Sometimes this page offers more than what's in the update release note. And that's frequently true, where the update release note might say, and we've added a JVM arg, and they name it, and that's it. But you have to go look at this doc. And sometimes they link to it, which is good, but you should pay attention. Everybody should be looking at this page. If you're managing a CF, instance and use JVM args to control it, and this is whether in command box or regular ColdFusion, running command box within ColdFusion within command box, or running ColdFusion at the command line or as a service, Linux, Windows, Mac, doesn't matter. You'll benefit from knowing about these JVM arguments. There was also, they came out also with a guide for the CF 2023 and 2021 arguments. So they created this in the 2025 timeframe. They kindly, because at the time, both 23 and 21 were still supported, they created a separate guide, and here's the JVM arguments, and they update that. So 21 is no longer updated, but 23 is updated with 25 for now, for another 2 years. And right, so CF 2023 gets 5 years of support, so it'll end in 2028. So we got a little less than 2 years of updates to come. So as they add new updates to 25 and 23, they update these two pages with the JVM arg. So if you're still on 23, you'll find what was added in update 23. I got a page here. Update, yeah, 23 was the latest CF23 update. So many numbers. Anyway, moving on. Okay, moving on. If you use CF containers, images, Docker images, Kubernetes deployment, Cube, whatever you do, there's all kinds of ways to do deployment things on cloud services. Point is, if you use containers, their startup time has been dramatically improved, sometimes 60 to 70% compared to 23 and 21. So yay. If you have been considering using CF containers, if you tried them in the earlier versions, you'll find the 25 ones are a lot faster. And the key is that generally where it's worse is if you did any of the environment variables that did configuration changes, that was another capability of the images, is you could pass in environment variables like, say, implement these packages, modules, and then CF would do that and then restart within the container. It would restart CF, and that was making it take twice as long as it needed to. So that no longer happens. That was a nice improvement that they finally added. It also added in 2025's implementation of the CF2025 image, we now have support for secrets and configs, which are like secrets. But anyway, moving on. And I want to clarify that you'll read a lot about those being something related to Docker Swarm, but you can use them with just a compose file. So anyway, it's not just about Swarm. In fact, let me say this real quick. If you're interested in using ColdFusion's or Lucy's or Boxlang's containers and images, I have a Git repo called, or GitHub repo. Just Google awesome CF compose, awesome CF compose. And I've got dozens of examples of compose files showing leveraging features of 25 and 23 and 21 and integrating CF with databases or pulling in Fusion Reactor or adding JVM arguments and how to do those things in Docker environment variables, compose lines, Docker files. I tended to do it mostly in compose because this was related to another thing that I forked called Awesome Compose, and it was all focused on compose. So I made these focused on compose. You can use them in just Docker files as well. I'll leave you to figure that out. Sometimes I show them when I have to. Otherwise, I just show it as compose because it's easier. But feel free, check it out. You can also, of course, use it in manifests and Kubernetes. And I show you a tool there, but easily converting a compose file into Kubernetes manifest. So let's move on. There's also new support for that central configuration server capability within containers. Again, there it is, it was new in 2023, and now you can have your images participate in this central config server. I haven't done a talk on that yet, but you can find ample documentation on it if you just search for it. The images also have dramatically improved documentation. So if you just Google or whatever search engine you use, look for ColdFusion Docker images, the first result that'll come up after the AI is the Adobe documentation page on Docker images, and they've been improved. That page has been dramatically improved, adding sections for secrets and configs and precedents and configs and new environment variables and how to use CCS. And there have been bug fixes to the containers and images, and they did a whole video on what's new in containers. So again, I'll leave you to check that out. Give me a second and represent. Okay. Now, some people will go, hey, that's all the cool, good new stuff. What else do I need to worry about? Well, there were some things that were removed. There were a lot of things that were old and have been deprecated for years and are now removed. So old language elements and features that have been removed. And some are removed for the sake of security. And then others are due to changes underlying libraries. So some may affect virtually nobody and others might affect everything you do. So just depends on whether you and past coders had used certain things. And so it's not gems, it's more traps. So I want to say there's a whole page called deprecated features, and you can find those listed there. And there's a table with the version on which they're removed, and you can look for the 2025. So that's one way. And then again, in my talk, which is a separate talk I'll do coming up soon on the Meetup, Migrating Apps to 2025, I have a whole section on the removals, and I'd go over them in more detail. And you can go get the PDF for that talk from my website that I showed at the start of the call. And there's the link to it as well right there. So, okay. I also want to point out that updates might have breaking changes. Oh, I see a comment I had. Yeah, so Ben said, I had to remove like 200 plus instances of HTML edit format from some old code. That was the biggest issue. Yes. So that's what I meant when I said some will affect you a lot and some won't affect you much at all. That was one that hit a lot of people. And HTML edit format has been around since, I don't know, CF 8 or 9, something like that, a long time, and maybe longer. The point is they decided to remove it, and they'd marked it as deprecated years ago. Same with parameter exists. Again, I don't want to get into all these details, but parameter exists is another one that was marked as deprecated in like CF3 when they came out with isDefine. And I know a lot of people don't like using isDefine, but the point is isDefine was the replacement for parameter exists. One took a quoted string that resolved to a variable name. Parameter exists just took a variable name, and it worked. It just wasn't as flexible. And they never took it away. Well, finally in 2025, they just created a new rule. And I discussed this in that talk. The new rule is anything that's been deprecated for more than one release is being removed. And that's true going forward. So some things were marked as deprecated in this release, and in 2 releases, they'll be removed in the future. So anyway, see the other talk for more about that stuff. Paolo asks, is CF report deprecated? So yeah, for example, it is deprecated. Let's be clear. Deprecated means you shouldn't be using it. Doesn't mean you cannot use it. Removed is you cannot use it. CF report has been deprecated for a long time and has not yet been removed. The CF report tag still works, but there were some problems with one of the recent updates that made CF reports break. And unfortunately, it's a feature that's listed as deprecated and no longer supported. So Adobe says they won't fix things related to it. So CF reports days are numbered. And I know some people love it and others are like, what the heck is that? And so there was a report builder tool that was written in Delphi. It was written in Delphi. It was a web, a UI, a desktop UI for building reports. It last was updated in like CF7, and it's been around forever. And it's going to go. And there's been no talk yet of a replacement for it. They should. All this stuff under the covers is Jasper reports. They could just integrate it or show us how to do it. Anyway, I got to move on. But no, for now, yes, it's deprecated. No, it's not removed. Let's put it that. And then Paolo asked to follow up. Report builder setup installer is missing. Exactly. So that report builder installer was, an Delphi thing from years ago, and they've stopped even offering it on the website because the feature is deprecated. So you can still use the CF report tag and the CFR files, CFR for ColdFusion report, that the CF builder tool builds. Sorry, the CF report builder. If I said CF builder, I meant to say CF report builder, like he did. CF report builder, that's another confusion, right? There's ColdFusion builder, which is a VS Code extension, which used to be an Eclipse thing. Anyway, let's move on. I'll leave you guys to explore that. I think I've said everything that needs to be said about that for now. And then be aware that updates sometimes do have breaking changes. So there have been 12 updates to 2025 since it came out, 12 updates. And really only update 8 added new features. Let me back up and say, that was true when I did this back in May. Have the 4 updates since then added any new features? So I have to double check that. But the point is, prior to update, none of the updates had added new features. Anyway, all of them, except update 8, were security fixes that had security improvements, and those security fixes often entailed breaking changes. That's the key point to be made here. And most of the time, Adobe said, hey, we're making it more secure by default. If you need to undo that for compatibility's sake, here's a JVM arg that you can add, and it will undo that one security feature of that one update. Maybe the update had 5 security improvements. It'll undo 1. So don't think that I don't need to apply the update. No, you need to apply the update, and you can add the JVM argument, undo the one thing that update might break. And you have to weigh it and consider whether you should do it or not. But that's not for this talk to discuss. The tech notes do discuss it. So each update, again, there's the link to all the tech notes for all the updates for 25. Each update's tech note discusses the change. And then I do a blog post. Do I mention that? Yeah, I don't. I do a blog post every time an update comes out, and I try to cover a little more detail about that update and the new JVM argument and what to think about. But, I'm doing it the day it comes out. So sometimes there's more discovery later, and check out comments at the bottom of my blog post where there might be people sharing news. And then I talked about that JVM args page. So check that out. And there you go. I'll cover some more in the migrating apps talk. So moving on, CF2025 did also, and we're going to go a few minutes later than the top of the hour. Hope people are okay with that. CF2025 fixes hundreds of bugs. You want to be aware of that. And some of them are Well, I'm saying that while new features and removals of old features are important, bug fixes are important as well. They may fix some problem you've suffered. So beware, that's important too. You might go, I didn't like going to 2023 because it caused X to happen. Well, maybe they fixed it and 2025 doesn't cause that to happen. Now, I want to say sometimes it's updates that make things not work. And if you hadn't applied the updates to 23, when you move to 25, you'll experience a problem that you would have experienced on 23 if you'd only kept up with the updates. Again, I covered that more in the other talk, but sometimes there literally are bug fixes. And yeah, check that out. There was 192 bug fixes in CF 2025, and you can either decry that as so many bugs, or you can celebrate, hey, they fixed them. So let's move on. And also, each update sometimes fixes bugs. And so I tracked, when I did this post, these at that time had these number of bug fixes, and it's continued into subsequent updates. So, and some of them may have less wide impact than others. So maybe they're important, maybe they're not. I'm just saying you should look at the tech notes. You'll always see for the tech notes where they're, this is saying in the original update of 2025, this page talked about what were the bugs fixed and listed 192, and then or linked to it. And then here's the page with the bug fixes themselves. And then each tech note for each update often has a table. If it fixes bugs, there's a table saying, here's the bugs that got fixed. Okay, moving on. Now, what about CF 2028, update 8? So that came out again in May, was generally called the AI update. This talk, when I put it together for the CF Summit, update 8 hadn't come out yet. So I didn't call this an update 8 Hidden Gems talk. I didn't know what it was going to entail. So anyway, I could do a whole talk on Hidden Gems and update 8, but I'm not going to do that. This talk was already accepted, and I'd not offered the Hidden Gems talk at last year's CF Summits. I just didn't for some reason. So I did it this year. That's what this was, and this is the update of that talk. So briefly about update 8, moving on. They made a lot about the AI features, sure, and there's lots of docs. I want to tell you, there's lots of docs about the AI features. This page has each of the new AI features and links to each of them that are often dozens of pages. So the AI capability is really substantial, and we're not going to cover it in this talk. And there were several sessions at the summit on each of those AI features, but none of them were recorded, sadly. So if you're interested in the AI stuff, I'll just point out they did during the pre-release do several videos. And I'm talking about the pre-release of update 8. So this was earlier this year, like in April of this year. They did several videos, so check it out, this page full of them. First was what's new in update 8, and that covers some of this generic stuff I'll mention in a moment. And then the AI models and the model context protocol, MCP, and then vector stores, and RAG, and the developer VS Code, and Perfmon, and security and analyzer, blah, 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 and language and feature enhancements that don't have anything to do with AI sometimes. So again, check out that video for more on that stuff. Again, you can get the presentation, get all these links by going to my site and getting the presentation. But it is about much more than just AI, really much more. It adds support for passkeys, right? So if you guys are interested in doing passkeys in your applications, ColdFusion now has that. Yeah, check it out. Go read about that. I don't have time in this talk to get into it. And also password hashing using a new algorithm called Argon 2, not new, but new support for Argon 2 as an algorithm. And a new capability called sets, which again comes from other languages. And there's several new built-in and member functions related to sets. And that had some consternation when it first came out because it can conflict with you having set function names. But anyway, let's move on. There were also a couple dozen other small language improvements, and then also improvements to the security code analyzer. If you don't know what that is, I covered that in another talk, a whole talk, or I'll need to do one if I haven't. And then to CF Builder, and I've done a whole talk on that. Anyway, for more on what's new in Update 8, there's the guide for it, and it has links again to each of these new changed features. And then Ben and Dave Byers have done blog posts in the recent few months on the Update 8 AI related features. So Ben's site, classically, of course, is bennadell.com, and he's got lots of stuff, but among them, I think it's probably been about several, at least. I'm going to do a categorizing of all of the ones I find as another post. I meant to do that before this, but I just didn't get to it. And then if Dave Byers has done them on coldfusion.adobe.com, and I just realized he also, since this talk, created his own site, and it's not coming to me at the top of my head, but if you just Google Dave Byers ColdFusion or David Byers, either one or the other, you'll find his site, and he's been doing his posts there as well as the Adobe blog. So that ColdFusion.adobe.com is the Adobe blog, the portal at the Adobe blog, the blogs at the Adobe portal. So he's done several posts on AI stuff. Leave it at that. Let's round up some other considerations to be aware of. And here's where I think we're probably going to need another 10 or 15 minutes if you guys are cool with that. And if you're not, if you got to go, we're at the top of the hour. I'll just continue the recording and you can watch the recording, catch up later. But let me get these done. First up, Java was updated to Java 21. So CF2025 comes out of the box with Java 21.0.6. And that was the latest as of March 2025 when they came out with this. It's been updated since then. And again, I've got blog posts on every time a new Java version comes out. I have a blog post on that new Java version. They come out quarterly, and you can change the Java version that underlies CF. For 2025, it should remain Java 21. CF 2023 ran on Java 17, and CF 21 2018 ran on Java 11. You don't want to cross the streams. 25 needs to run on 21. 23 needs to run on 17. 21 needs to run on 11. Don't try to upgrade them above those major versions. But I'm saying the minor version has changed, and 2106, the latest update to Java for 21, is now 21012. I keep a list because I talk about this stuff with clients every day. 21012 is the latest version of Java 21, and you could update that yourself. But the point is CF25 did come with Java 21, so yay. And most of those changes to Java benefit Java developers more than us, but the Adobe CF team might leverage things under the covers for us or add new features based on those. And they haven't done too much of that yet, but I think there's some to come. In particular, some may know that Java 21 added what's called lightweight virtual threads. And CF could change CF thread to use virtual threads. I believe Lucy does in a way. I don't know if it's automatic. But anyway, the point is we don't have it yet in CF. So, and then I want to point out as well, you'll hear that the Java Security Manager was a feature of Java that's been long, again, deprecated by the Java community for about 2 to 3 years, and it's going to be removed at some point. Well, it hasn't been removed yet, but that underlies the ColdFusion sandbox security feature, and that is marked. So go back to Paolo and me discussing things earlier. The sandbox security feature is now marked as deprecated in CF 2025, newly. That means that in 2 releases from now, so the next release, they'll mark it as no longer supported. And then in the next release, they'll remove it. That's, again, I discussed that more in the other talk, but that's documented by Adobe as their policy of how they're going to, once something's marked deprecated, when will it be finally removed? So sandbox security's days are numbered unless somebody comes up with a solution. By the way, Pete Freitag has come up with a solution which you might want to explore, but it doesn't yet can make the sandbox security continue to work. It's a different feature, but you could leverage it yourself. I got to move on, but I'll just say if you're interested in that, reach out to Pete and ask about it. He showed it to me at the CF Summit. Anyway, I got to move on. So Tomcat was updated to a new version of Tomcat called 10, specifically 10.1. So CF 2025, whether you deploy it as the server form of deployment or the zip form of deployment, it comes under the covers with Tomcat, and it is Tomcat 10. Specifically Tomcat 10.1. CF 23 had run on Tomcat 9, just to compare. And then the changes to Tomcat 10 are mostly inconsequential to us, but they're not entirely inconsequential. So there's a whole blog post on what changed with this move to Tomcat 10. You probably don't need to know it, but if you're interested, there it is covered. And by the way, CF 2025 originally came with 10.1.34 specifically, and the updates change them. Sometimes about 2 out of 10 updates change the Tomcat version, and update 12 that came out last week specifically has now got us on 10.1.57. And that's important because sometimes the Tomcat team updates Tomcat to fix some security problem. And this is a problem. This is the latest one as of that last week when they released it. That 10.1.57 was the latest. They'll probably come out with one this week or next week, and people are going to be saying, hey, Adobe, when are you going to create a new update that updates our Tomcat? We do have to wait for them to do it. If we use ColdFusion with Tomcat deployed in it, we have to wait for Adobe to update the Tomcat. We cannot do that ourselves. If you want to install your own Tomcat and deploy ColdFusion as a war, You can do that with the Enterprise Edition and the Developer and Trial Editions. And that's what Command-Box does under the covers. It deploys ColdFusion as a WAR file on Undertow. But you can deploy ColdFusion as a WAR on Tomcat if you wanted to, and you can get the latest Tomcat and deploy CF on it. And it's not that that won't generally work. It will work. It's that you're updating Tomcat and putting CF on it. The Tomcat that Adobe provides under the covers for us, they've modified it. And so we can't just somehow stick Tomcat in there underneath CF. They have to modify it. They have to update it. I hope that's helpful. I'm going to move on. Other updates to underlying tech, like for operating systems and databases and web servers. See the support matrix. The original one was here. There's an updated one as of update 8 because in update 8, they offered more things, the newer versions of databases and newer versions of OS. In fact, Windows Server 2025, people were complaining all year, when's CF going to support 2020? Well, remember when it came out in February 2025, Windows Server 2025 hadn't come out yet. So no, it didn't support it. But in May of this year, they came out with that update 8. And listen, here's the key. They also came out with refreshed installers. The new installers are really what you need to be able to run CF 2025 on Windows Server 2025. And also, was it Tahoe? I think I have it. I'll show you in a moment. So Sybase and Solaris support were dropped in 2025. There you go. Windows 25 and macOS Tahoe were added with that new updated installer. They call it a refreshed installer that came out with update 8. So if you get CF 2025 installer today or since May, late May, that would be the version of the installer that would be able to support Windows 25 or macOS Tahoe. And then they upgraded various things under the covers, Anti-SAMI, Bouncy Castle, Seek Editor, ESAPI. Anyway, I track the version numbers in my original Hidden Gems talk, the one I did last year that's available on my website. It wasn't called Hidden Gems a year later. It's called Hidden Gems in 2025. You'll see it there, offered last year. And it's the original version of this talk and I covered different things in this one just to try to advance understanding of things. Anyway, the point is in that talk, I had to take some stuff out because they were already fitting in an hour. So the version number details are in that original talk if you're interested. Finally, licensing change. And some people would go, oh, you've been holding this one back, bury the lead, the elephant in the room. Yes, CF licensing is now subscription only. So there's no more perpetual licenses from CF 2025 forward. If you still, if you bought CF 23 or earlier, you can continue to run it. But for 25 and beyond, if you get and install CF 2025 and you license it, that license is now only by subscription. And if you stop paying the license, it will revert to the free developer edition. So yes, we have to pay subscription. And like a lot of products these days, it is what it is. The pricing is published online. You don't have to ask Adobe. You can go to their website and find it. Actually, I think since this talk, I found that they had removed the pricing, or it's harder to find. But anyway, it was published, and it is published elsewhere. The point is, here's the prices that were published then, and it was $760 a year for standard. And I just want to say that per month, that's cheaper than Google TV. So stop complaining so much. More importantly, here's the price for Enterprise. I want to say more importantly, this is about the same price you'd have paid if you just bought CF every 2 years, because you always got a 50% discount if you went from the previous version to the new version. So you'd buy the new version every 2 years, get it at a 50% discount. Over 4 years, for example, this is the amount you would have paid for CF as a perpetual license. Now, granted, then you would have kept it and you could have stopped paying. Now you can't stop paying. I'm just saying the price has not gone up. It's just the need to pay regularly is now a subscription. And again, if you wanted to get that discount, you had to upgrade every version. So anyway, and many people do also already license CF on a subscription basis. I want to make this point. Some people go, oh, everybody's got to start doing. No, some people have been doing subscriptions for years. So if you run CF on AWS or Azure AMIs, the machine images, or if you use an ETLA, an enterprise term license agreement, or if you use CF hosting, those are all based on ColdFusion licenses that are subscription-based and have always been subscription-based. It's just that now everybody has to be subscription-based. And again, it doesn't affect you if you're running on 23 or earlier. No change at all. You've bought your license. Again, you got 2 more years of updates coming for CF 2023. And the developer edition is still free. I want to make that clear. Some people go, what? Developer? What are you talking about? Yes, you can run ColdFusion for free, not pay Adobe a dime. It's the free developer edition. You're just not allowed to use it for production. And it's got some limitations, like no more than 2 concurrent requests at a time. Otherwise, the third or beyond will get a message saying, hey, this is currently in the developer edition. Wait a minute and hit refresh. That's not good look in production, right? Anyway, let's move on. I've done talks on that too, so let's move on. What if you still want to buy CF2023, right? Some people might go, I don't want to buy 25. I don't want to pay for the subscription. Well, you can buy CF2025 and backwards license it to 2023, but you're still paying a subscription. I believe you're going to find that's true. And that's covered in one of the guides that I'll talk about in a moment. Are there education discounts? Yes. And so again, for more about licensing and the license modules, there's named user licensing and feature restricted licensing, neither of which mean anything about who's using ColdFusion or what features in ColdFusion are restricted. Doesn't mean anything like that. Those are words that came from Adobe's commercial licensing people about, Creative Cloud and crap like that. This is Adobe's CF team had to follow the same nomenclature. So don't worry about those words. Anyway, you can read more about what they mean and how the licenses differ on this page that talked about it. And then this page that talked about it. And most importantly, this page, licensing and activation, this is the section of the docs that cover all about the licensing and those different models and all that stuff. So, and offline activation and blah, blah, blah. So good. If you have any questions, what about this? What about that? Thankfully, I haven't seen any pop up yet. If you have questions about this stuff, naturally some will. I'll just say reach out to Adobe. Not me. You can reach out to Adobe. I mean, you can reach out to me, but there's some things where I won't be able to help you about your specific situation. But you should reach out to Adobe at cfinstall@adobe.com. That's like the free support email address. And you're interested in buying CF, so it's a good place to start. They'll get you to the right people. And I don't note any changes about differences between standard and enterprise. They're still there, and they still have differences. There's not new changes in the differences, no changes in the differences between standard and enterprise. So when does public support end for all these various things we talked about? So CF 2023 will end in May of 2028. CF 21 ended in November of 2025, and 2018 ended in 23. So it's always 5 years. And so we'll have 5 years seemingly of updates for 2025. So to 2030. I should have added that, but anyway, you can go to this page and it lists every version of every product from Adobe, and you'll see that CF 2025 is 2030. And then I did a blog post when 21 was ending, and another blog post when 2018 was ending. Now, finally, ColdFusion Builder related to this. If you didn't know, in case you missed it, CF Builder is now a Visual Studio Code VS Code extension that's free. I'm not here to talk about that. I just want to clarify that it was new in 2022. It's an extension. It's in the extensions marketplace as formerly Adobe ColdFusion Builder. Prior to this, there was an Eclipse-based thing called CF Builder. That's been the end of life since 2023. I could do an entire session on CF Builder, on VS Code. I've done some. I just want to tell you that what's changed in 2025 regarding CF Builder. And it is updatable via the VS Code extensions panel, and it can be set to auto update. That's what I do. And there was an update in February that added CF 2025 support. Yeah, so February 26th. Don't know why it took so long. But anyway, moving on. And there's a doc page on that. And then there was update 5 in May of 26 that added the update 8 support to CFML. Okay, so it's update 5 of the VS Code extension, adding support for the update 8 CFML. And it also, check this out, because some people complain about problems with VS Code and CF Builder. It improved the syntax handling of HTML and JavaScript and CSS, and it added indicators for what was deprecated and removed, which was nice. And it also removed the need to worry about workspaces generally, not completely. Anyway, and it revamped the security analyzer feature that's built into VS Code, CF Builder and VS Code. And it added code assist for member functions, which is pretty cool. And it enhanced some Docker support and added support for Linux. So you can use the extension now in Linux. and some other improvements and bug fixes. And for more on that, check out this URL. That's all about that specific May 2026 update to VS Code. And they even did a video on it because, again, this was in that May timeframe. So you might remember one of the what was new in Update 8 covered developer tools, and that's VS Code. I also want, check this out. Some of you need to hear this. Adobe announced in June of this year that they now support deploying the CF Builder, not just on VS Code, but also on Cursor. So Cursor is another implementation of a VS Code underlying similar functionality, but different product entirely. And they added support for that. Now you might go, oh, I don't use Cursor. I use, any of these other ones that are out there. Well, check out this bigger news that wasn't as clear. Cursor relies on the OpenVSX registry. It doesn't use the Microsoft Marketplace. It uses the OpenVSX registry. And ColdFusion Builder is now in that OpenVSX registry. And there's the specific way to get to it if you need it in your version. And I'm saying that means you can now use CF Builder from VS Codium, Windsurf, and Gravity. I couldn't remember all of them when I was thinking a moment ago. So anyway, I've tried it with each of these, and it works. So check it out. I hope that's helpful to some people. And lastly, this update earlier this month, Update 7 strengthened security of the RDS query viewer, mitigating some XSS vulnerabilities. Again, if you didn't know it, CF Builder has long been an RDS-based query viewer. If you don't know, I've done talks about it, presentations about it, chapters and books about it. And it was in the old CF Builder, and it's been carried over into the new CF Builder. I should do another whole talk on that stuff. So anyway, moving on. There's the URL for more about that. And then wrapping up, here's some more resources for you. And yeah, we're right at a little bit after 15 minutes after. So anyway, I want you to know that you don't have to install CF2025 to start playing with it. You don't have to install it to start playing with it. If you go to cffiddle.org, that was Adobe's provided fiddle. It's been new and improved. So check it out if you haven't seen it in a while. I mean, it's always supported CF2025, but in May they updated it. So check that out. And then trycf.com. It also has long had CF2025. It was recently updated. And the changes aren't everybody's cup of tea, but the point is it's new and improved. I'll leave it at that. And github.com, James Moberg had created his own CFML fiddle project, which if you get it and implement it, uses command box, and you can spin up instances of different CF versions as a fiddle. If you know what this fiddle concept means, the point is you can run your own fiddles. You don't have to run your code in your app completely. You can just try a little 5-line template, hit submit, save, run, and don't have to save a file. You don't have to do anything. Just put it in and run it. That's what these fiddles are about. Some of you know it from TryCF. Some of you know it from CF Fiddle. This is to run your own fiddle. Now, finally, resources for learning more about CF2025. I'm just going to leave these up here. And you can get the screenshot if you want right now, or just get the PDF. And each of these are different things covering the things that were new in 2025, some of which I pointed to, some of which I didn't. And then the videos, and there's a bunch of these videos. And these were on what was new in 2025, not Update 8. That was the earlier page. This is what's new in 2025. And there's the playlist for that at the bottom. You can just go right to that playlist. And keep an eye on future ones at their page, which is Adobe ColdFusion at youtube.com. Phew. So lots of gems. I counted several dozens across language and feature capabilities. And then there's bug fixes and other stuff, improvements to underlying text. So lots new. I hope my goal is that you'll be more motivated or at least informed to consider CF 2025. And if you have any questions or follow-up, I'm reachable by email or social media. And one more time, the slides are available at that site. Here's the QR code to get it. And we've answered questions throughout, but I don't mind sticking around for another few minutes. Thank you, Ben. And I can't see in this StreamYard view how many people are on, so I don't know how many people are on right now. But thank you, sir. And I'll assume you two at least don't have any further questions. But if anybody else is waiting, this tool also doesn't let me see if you're typing. So, and I don't think YouTube would either. So if you're typing a long question, cut it to the clipboard, say, hold on a moment, and then paste it in and finish typing it, and we'll wait. But otherwise, if I don't hear from anybody in the next 20, 30 seconds, we'll go ahead and call it a day. There you go. Yeah. So Ben, man, isn't that something? And let that be a lesson. Ben is so gracious and humble. He doesn't mind admitting something like that. Most people don't know about So let me just say, I'll take a moment to talk while we wait. There you go. And I'm trying to remember when I said that, I was like, did I really do one on that? I don't think I did. So I need to do it. So let me just say real quickly about it, because it's a little bit tricky. And part of the reason why people don't know about it is that you have to jump through some hoops to get it to run. And if you don't do that, you're not going to talk about it and you're not going to tell anybody about it. But I've been showing people how to do it for a long time. Let me just say quickly, even in the old CF Builder that was Eclipse based, because this came out in CF 2018, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, goodness gracious, time's flying. 8 years ago, it was added as a feature in CF Builder, the old Eclipse based one, and you had to jump through certain hoops to get it to work. And now I just want to say now what matters for most people is it's in the VS Code extension that's been out for 3 years called CF Builder. And again, you have to know to jump through certain hoops. And that's what keeps people from getting it to work. Bottom line, real quickly, is when you go into the CF Builder interface, you'll see that there's an area called servers. You need to define a server that connects your local VS Code to whatever CF instance you want to talk to. That could be your own local machine. Okay, oh, there you go. So Ben says, I'm still on Sublime Text. Yeah. So you, and I want to tell you this, even if you don't want to use VS Code at all, you could use it just to do this. And I believe they're working on making it that you don't even need to use VS Code anymore. But let me just say this real quick. Even if you don't use Sublime, if you don't use VS Code, you could use it just for this. The challenge is you have to, get VS Code. That's free. If you already have it, you're done. You get the CF Builder extension. It's free. It's free. It's not paid. It's free. And if you haven't gotten it, you can get it and take it out later. You can disable it. You can open workspaces with some extensions and not others. You can create profiles in VS Code. Again, I could do multiple talks on this stuff. My point is, if one had VS Code and CF Builder, and when you click on the button to see the CF Builder interface of VS Code, in fact, let me just see. I think I might, just have it open here. I don't know. Drum roll. I'll just move this to the screen. Again, we're not going to make this be a talk on CF Builder, but I'll just say real quickly. So this is the extensions marketplace right there. And the extension is called Adobe ColdFusion Builder. And if you click on it, you'd see their help about it and what version you're on and when it came out and what it's about. And there's links in here. Some people never bother to scroll down and see all this information. And it talks about things like how the security analyzer works. In fact, I believe if I just keep scrolling down, I'll eventually see it right there, security analyzer integration. So just real quick, if one had things configured correctly, then while they're looking at a template or a folder of CF, when it's properly configured, you could right click on that template or that folder and say, analyze the security analyzer. And it would show this report saying what templates have what security problems. And when you click on this, it would show you them. And it's cut off here, but you'd see what kind of, like, is it a cross-site scripting or whatever the various things that are available. What I want to say that confuses people is that, and now let's ignore this on the screen, and who knows what's going to be under here. I'm just going to open a new blank tab. So here, this CF button is CF Builder. Now, I know some people use Kamasama K or Gareth's or all the other ones that are out there. And I did a talk last year at CF Summit, and I've offered it online because I gave it at the Mid-Michigan CFUG last year too. And it's on getting started with ColdFusion Builder. And I just want to say that if you get this CF logo appearing, then you would add a server that points to your local instance, for example. And then once you've got that properly connected, which is a hurdle for some people for various reasons, then you'd see this RDS data view and RDS file view feature. You may or may not choose to enable or use that, but then you would create what's called a project or import or open a project. And the project would be where you'd point to your code. And if you've got a project and it's been connected to a server, and see, there's the stumbling block. You have to know to add a server. Then you have to know to create a project. Then you have to link the project to the server. But if you do those things, then if you've got a project open, when you right click on a folder, you can say, do the security analyzer on that. And then if everything's working right, it'll work. And it'll call up an interface in here that shows you that report like I just showed you. And there's even a button there that says export it as HTML, and that will pop this beautiful, really nicely formatted, nicely prepared graphic report of your vulnerabilities and what to do about them. I covered in the CF Builder talk last year when I mentioned the security analyzer that is great and it's free and it's built in if you just know how to connect the dots. Also, you should be aware that Pete Freitag, Foundeo.com, has Fixinator, Fixinator, Fixinator. And it's a commercial tool, purely a command line tool. And you can implement command box with Fixinator, point it at your code, run it, and he processes it through a server that he supports, secure, blah, blah, blah. And he produces a report. And he also offers the option that says, I can change it if you want me to, and I'll make backups and stuff like that. So again, you can learn more about Fixinator. That's a commercial tool. You can learn more about Security Analyzer. That's a free tool built into CF Builder. It's one of many. And I'll just repeat, that page we were looking at showed you lots of features, and there's documentation on it. And again, this talk wasn't about CF Builder because that's not new with 25. It's just improved. It's changed. All right. So anyway, cool. All right. And then, so Paolo just asked this question minutes ago. Why is it not showing up on screen? There you go. Oh, no, thank you for that one. So here's Paolo's question. Is this extension compatible with Cursor? And if we were in an audience, I'd be asking everybody, hey, what's the answer? And I think, Ben, you're on the other. Oh, there's somebody else there. So everybody, what's the answer to Paolo's question? Is this extension compatible with Cursor? He must have been a little distracted. I'm just going to back up a couple slides. Check it out, Paolo. Adobe announced in June that they now support Cursor. And here's the blog post where they announced it. And I mentioned that it supports the OpenVSX registry. So you might have gotten distracted momentarily. Maybe you're looking at something else that I just talked about. I don't know how that can happen. So anyway, thank you, MIS Videos DBA, whoever that is, for your kind comment. So yeah, look for a future talk from me. I'll do one. I've been meaning to do for a long time, one on that security analyzer. Cool. Thank you, sir. All right. Well, we've gone now, hour and a half. Sorry about that. For those listening on the recording, we went an hour and a half. Thanks to you all who stuck it out to be here and ask questions. We welcome that. I will be announcing tonight or tomorrow over the weekend talks for the coming weeks, including already one of the other presenters. I'll wait till we get that firmed up before I say anything. And if there's anybody listening again that wants to, you're free to join us. So, so you guys if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the comments popping up. So thanks to everybody who's saying thanks. And with that, I'll go ahead and call it a day, and I look forward to the next event. I'll get the announcement out shortly, and it'll be posted on YouTube on this channel that you're looking at, and it'll be put into the playlist. So if you just watch that playlist, you'll see when things are added. So more to come. Looking forward to it. Let's rock on ColdFusion and CFML communities, Lucy and Box Lang. All right. Till the next time. See you guys.